They are the deserved champions. There was nothing fluky about it. I don't feel a mystique yet around Philadelphia that still exists around Kansas City. Now, it's existed for different reasons. Last year it was, they win a game by blocking a kick. They win a game this way, you know what I mean? The mystique. And I think that can only be built over years. Mm-hmm. What I do, go ahead.
Don't you think, though, that mystique could be severely damaged if Philly takes Kansas City's lunch money again?
The problem...
they bully them like they bullied them in the Super Bowl?
Yes and no, because the problem with that is because the Bengals beat the Chiefs in the playoffs.
Okay. And then he just goes on and starts talking about the Chiefs and the Bengals. And I want to focus on the Eagles here and the lack of mystique relative to the Kansas City Chiefs. And there's another clip that I want to play for you all in a moment. And it is so fascinating because I feel as though there is this cognitive dissonance between how the players feel, how the teams feel, compared to how the media feels. The media, because that's who's creating this mystique, so to speak. It's all on how these narratives are constructed, quite frankly. And to me, it all comes down to Jalen Hurts. It 100% all comes down to Jalen Hurts. And they feel as though that this Eagles team is great, but that there's this limitation at quarterback. And that if they had a better quarterback, then this team would be dominant. This team would be ripping off win after win after win, Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl. But they see it as a situation where it's like, honestly, put it this way. It's seen closer to the Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers and Brock Purdy and the 49ers than it is, again, on a spectrum, than to Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm certainly not arguing that Jalen Hurts with the Philadelphia Eagles is similar to Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, but if we have that on one end and then we have like the Jimmy Garoppolo, like you guys saw the videos that I made recently about Con Coward literally comparing Jalen Hurts to Trent Dilfer and stuff like that, and compared him to Dak Prescott and Brock Purdy and whatnot, and that's what it's seen. And even one of the most ridiculous statements that I've heard in a long time came from Mangini. I mean, this is what he said. Here he's asking that, they're talking about, who needs to win this game for the rematch in week 2, Kansas City Chiefs versus the Philadelphia Eagles. And he's talking about how, it's important for Philadelphia Eagles to play well. But, like, listen to what he says. To me, this stood out so much.
It's going to be important. And it's also going to be important from Philadelphia's perspective to gauge where they are. Was that just a hot streak that they had at the end of the season? Mm-hmm. Where they hit it right, or is that legitimately the team that they're going to be moving into next season?
Think of how insane of a statement that is. I talked about a little bit about this in the other clip when I did like a larger section of this because the conversation's a little bit different. So I wanted to keep it. I wanted to make this separate. With Jalen Hurts as the starting quarterback, they had lost only one game since September against the Buccaneers. And then after that, they did not lose a single game, including the playoffs. I think it ended up being 16-0. Because I think it was 17-1. Or let me see what that was then. Because if you factor in the Commanders' loss and then including the playoffs. I mean, look at this. Haven't lost since September 29th, where Jalen Hurts started and finish the game. You beat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. In what world is that a hot streak? Like, what? At the end of the season, how does that make any sense? If you just want to look at the Eagles as a whole and you don't want to say, well, Jalen Hurts injured, who cares? You still lost. They won 16 of their last 17 games. That's not a hot streak. That's called being a great team. That's called being an elite team. It makes no sense. You could say the Baltimore Ravens were on a hot streak. You could say that the Washington Commanders were on a hot streak. But I mean, they beat the Cincinnati Bengals 37-17. They beat the Washington Commanders 26-18. The Los Angeles Rams, you know that team that was supposed to beat the Philadelphia Eagles in the playoffs? 37-20. The Baltimore Ravens, they shut down Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry 24-19. Pittsburgh Steelers, who had a lot of momentum going, beat them 27-13. So it's just like, that's what I'm saying. People don't believe that this team was actually a great team, which is kind of bizarre when you think about how historic they were. And it really all comes down to Jalen Hurts. If people thought that Jalen Hurts was at the level of Lamar, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, like truly in that little party that they got going on, the four of them, people would say this team is repeating. Who's going to possibly, the only way that this team loses is with injuries. I really think so. Because think about, I mean, like it's just, let's just even use current teams right now. Let's not even go too far with like the Jimmy Garoppolo type situations or the Trent Dilfer situations. Anytime you go into the playoffs with these teams, it always gets looked at through the quarterback lens. Can Jared Goff lead the Detroit Lions? This true Detroit Lions team is rolling. They're awesome, high-powered offense. How will Jared Goff play? What can Matthew Stafford do with the Rams? Will Lamar Jackson finally be great in the playoffs and get over this hump? The Buffalo Bills versus the Kansas City Chiefs. It's always Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes. It's very rarely are we talking about how will the Kansas City Chiefs defense get after Josh Allen? How will the Buffalo Bills defense make things uncomfortable for Patrick Mahomes? I mean, that's pretty much never discussed, honestly. If we're outside of like some of the deep dive videos, like the casual conversation is just not that. And I don't even 100% even blame it, because like that's why people are watching. But it's Joe Burrow versus Lamar Jackson. And when it came to this Super Bowl, it wasn't Jalen Hurts versus Patrick Mahomes. That is not how this game was really marketed, quite frankly. Obviously, you're still going to need, to some degree, Jalen Hurts is the quarterback. But I mean, think about the conversations. It was like, how great does Saquon Barkley need to be? How great can this defense be? Will this defense have an answer for the Kansas City Chiefs? There was more conversations about Fangio's previous success rate against Patrick Mahomes. And remember, I made videos and I ripped that apart, and I was like, what are we talking about here? You want to talk about the games when you had no I'm not even gonna rehash it, but it was just like it was such insane takes that then got like spread all around the media, where they were like, oh, Fangio, Patrick Mahomes owns him, and it's like, oh my god. And it was just rare. It was actually like, what does Jalen Hurts need to do in order to just like essentially like not hurt his team? I mean, like seriously, like that's where more of the conversations were around. And so that's what it gets boiled down to. That's what it gets boiled down to. There was a feeling that even last year, this Philadelphia Eagles team was able to win, even with Jalen Hurts being I'm going to try to be as accurate as I can with the statement like this. I feel as though the general consensus was that he is a average quarterback who has more moments where he's actually kind of bad than great. I feel as though that was the general temperature of Jalen Hurts throughout this season. That it was just kind of like, he's an average quarterback, and he has some really rough moments when you're just like, this is not good. And of course, he's still a quarterback. He's still an athlete. He can still have some highs and can do some pretty cool stuff. But like, And that's why we had the whole conversation of if Dak Prescott was on the Eagles, if Baker Mayfield was on the Eagles. I mean, obviously we know the Josh Allens and the Mahomeses and stuff, but it's like we started now talking about these other Brock Purdy was on the Eagles, and it's like, We saw Brock Purdy with the 49ers with the stacked roster as well. Like, let's hold our breath. And I'm not going back in time. I'm not going to be re-triggered by these conversations. But that's really what it gets boiled down to. Especially because Jalen Hurts does not put up video game numbers throughout the regular season. Even though when you take away his injuries and missed games last season, I already went through the stats with you. He would be essentially like top 10, top 5 in all the main stats, the passing yards, the touchdowns, etc., etc. So, but his game, at the end of the day, and I've discussed this a lot now recently, his game does not jump off the screen. So when you watch him, even his mobility when he runs, Kyler Murray looks more exciting. And I'm saying this very superficially, by the way. I'm not saying I'd rather have Kyler Murray over Jalen Hurts. But his mobility is more exciting. It feels more elusive. It feels faster, quicker. Right? Like you could just see it. Whatever it is, the twitchiness of it all. It just feels more exciting. Feels more dynamic. Same thing with Lamar, Jaden. Even Bo Nix. For those of you Eagles fans who maybe didn't watch a lot of Bo Nix videos, there's like this like kind of physicality, kind of baller nature of like you can't get me mentality, and like and that just came off the screen. But the way how Jalen Hurts is from a personality, from how he presents himself, from his style of play, it doesn't jump off the screen. And so you combine that with not like 5,000 passing yards and 44 touchdowns, and they're like, yeah, he's just not that good. He's okay. I mean, look how great his team is. Considering how great his team is, shouldn't he put up better numbers? And it's like, they won the Super Bowl. Isn't that what it's all about? It's just like, they did exactly what they needed to do to dominate teams and win the Super Bowl. And it's like, it's not good enough. Like that, it is kind of crazy when you think about it. When you really, really, really try to think about it. That you could win the Super Bowl. And they were like, well, he should have put up better numbers if he had a better team. And it's like, because they decided to not throw the ball as much as you wanted them to, or because they didn't take as much risks as you wanted them to. Why do that when you're the best team? Why do that? It makes no sense. And it's exactly what the Kansas City Chiefs did in 23 especially. When it was like, our defense is crushing you. Why would we do risky stuff? We're just going to make sure that we stay in control of the game and don't hurt ourselves. As Sean Payne talks a lot about, you lose more games than you win. The Philadelphia Eagles knew that they had the best roster and the best team. So it was like, we're just going to get out of our own way. We're not going to put ourselves in situations to lose games. And that's why, if you recall, and this kind of really reached like the peak in terms of the media and especially the commentators talking about this, like commentators in terms of like when you're watching the games against the Rams. There was this feeling that the Philadelphia Eagles, it was against the Rams and against the Commanders, because I think both those games, it was kind of close-ish, and then it just kind of like snaps. And that was the feeling of like, this team just leans on you and leans on you and leans on you, and the physicality and the O-line and the run game, and they're just going to keep going and going and going, and the defense keeps the score of the opposing team kind of down, and then eventually in the second half, the other team just breaks. And there was really that feeling of just like, we're just leaning on you, leaning on you, leaning on you, and then snap. And in a lot of ways, that's not necessarily incorrect. And so why, if that's working for you, it's like, why are you going to be like, we need Jalen Hurts to throw for 200 yards in the first half? Because reasons. It's like, why? Why risk any of the weird, fluky stuff that happens every single week? Every single Sunday, Monday, Thursday, Saturday, whenever the heck they're playing games these days. Like, why? And it worked. I could understand if this was 22 and they still lost the Super Bowl and it was close and it was a heartbreaker. Then I could understand to a degree. Or even if they won the Super Bowl but they squeaked on by. Like what we saw the Kansas City Chiefs do in 23. You squeak on by in the division, right? They squeak on by round after round after round, really, except for against the Miami Dolphins. then I could kind of understand that a little bit. But there's still that general sense of they could have lost against the Rams. And, if the Commanders didn't fumble those balls, I don't know, man. It seems like the Commanders would have won. And, man, I don't know. The Chiefs weren't as good. They were banged up. They didn't have weapons. Their O-line. Really, the Bills were the better team. And if the Bills won, I think the Bills beat the Philadelphia Eagles. Or really, the Ravens were the best team. If Mark Andrews just catches that ball, they beat the Bills. And then they would have beat the Chiefs. And then they would have beat the Eagles. It's like, well, that's a lot of, well, they would have. I mean, there's plenty of situations here. If the Eagles kept on, sneaking on by, it's like I could understand a little bit. I could understand why those conversations around the Chiefs were being had when you're like, man, were they really better than the Baltimore Ravens? And you're like, it feels like the Baltimore Ravens were a better team, but they just completely got outcoached and outclassed in that AFC Championship game. And in the Super Bowl, it was like, man, feels like the 49ers could have been the better team, but then it was like you have a random fumble from Christian McCaffrey that gets a bad bounce and the 49ers don't get to recover it. You have Greenlaw go down, which then really changed everything defensively for the 49ers. You have a muffed punt. You're like, all of these things had to happen just for them to still win in the final seconds of the first, chunk of overtime. And yet, it was still almost right there. And then I could understand. You could be like, But at the end of the day, when you roll the Commanders and when you force those fumbles, and then when you roll the Kansas City Chiefs, it's like you start to lose it. You start to lose a little bit because the game got close against the Rams at the end. It's one thing if Puka Nacua was in the end zone and wide open, and the ball just went right between his hands. Then I could kind of understand a little bit. But yeah, it came down to the wire in that game. It could be the playoffs. It's okay. And you can't really point to, the Rams really did themselves in. No, Jalen Carter is out there just unleashing. And so then the Eagles are supposed to be penalized for playing great situational defense? Doesn't really make sense. Just like how when I praise the Kansas City Chiefs for playing that situational defense against, say, the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, but especially the Buffalo Bills last season, in the playoffs. It's like that's on the Kansas City Chiefs. That's why it was both simultaneously like, it felt like that they had that little mystique as kind of like Nick was talking about, but also when the number was called for them, they answered. So it's like, I don't know. It does become a weird thing. But I do think it's fair, though, at the end of the day, to say that the Chiefs still have that mystique and why they would have it over the Eagles, even if people really believed in Jalen Hurts. It's a little bit harder. I think maybe if people saw Jalen Hurts as like Josh Allen level or Lamar level, they would, I don't know if they would feel a mystique. They would feel like, oh God, this team's great. But I do think that there's still that mystique with the Chiefs because at the end of the day, you have Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and Spags. And I believe that that's the best trio in football. You have the best coach quarterback duo. And then you have the best coordinator on the opposite side of the ball. So that it's just in any given game you go into with any given roster, that's just always going to be like, oh gosh. You have to bring your A game in that situation. You do. And the Eagles knew it too. And that's why the Eagles absolutely went all in and said, we need our A game. We need to be perfect. And they were. And when they were perfect, it was obviously domination. But it's just like, it's not hard to imagine that if the Eagles left the door open even a little bit, the Chiefs could find a way. I mean, that is who the Chiefs are. That is who Andy Reid is. That is who Spags is. That is who Patrick Mahomes is. So, I get it. I feel like even if the Eagles won the Super Bowl in 22, losing in 2023, and then winning in 24, like, even if they won 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls, they would still say this is a great team, but like, look how bad they were in 23. They fell apart, this, that. I do think that this the level of consistency that the Chiefs have had affords them to that feeling. And I think you have teams like the Ravens and the Bills and the Bengals that fundamentally, who are seen as the top quarterbacks, obviously, they struggle to beat them in the moments that matter most, aka the playoffs. And so it's just like, you know, that becomes the thing. Whereas the Eagles, it's like they don't necessarily have that. They lost to the Buccaneers in 23. So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think too, and this will be my last statement here. If the Eagles won the Super Bowl again this year, it's like, would there be a mystique? And I guess it's a little bit hard to predict too much because you'd have to see how they win. I think if they had maybe another dominant Super Bowl performance or something, then maybe. But I don't know. I think there would still always feel that this is just a great team. That's just a beautiful house of cards that could unravel at any moment. Because I think also Sirianni, I think that's the other thing, and I won't make this clip any longer. But I think that's also a big part of it. People feel, I really do believe this, that a massive percentage of people feel like that Sirianni and Jalen Hurts are just really fortunate to be where they are. And coach-quarterback duo is incredibly important. And when people don't really think that Sirianni is responsible for why this team won, and same thing with Jalen Hurts, you're just not going to fear them then at the end of the day. You're just really going to be like, man, A.J. Brown, that O-line, Saquon, Devontae, that defense, they better be there. If not, who's going to Sirianni and Jalen Hurts are going to find a way through. They don't believe that. But they do believe that with Mahomes, Andy, and Spags. Those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Philadelphia Eagles? Do you think there should be any mystique around them? Why do you think there isn't or there is? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. It's something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.